Hello and welcome to the season finale of Rose Play for Season three's review of Child of Light. As always, I am your host, Orion Moonrose, and without any further ado, let's slash our way into the first part, the history, the plot, and the story. So, what is the history behind the game? Well, of course, its developer and publisher was both Ubisoft and Ubisoft Montreal, which had complete creative control pretty much over this project. Most of the development team that came from Child of Light was also development team on Far Cry 3, which is somewhat very noticeable during the skill tree part of the RPG element in it. As for the rest of the history, now this one might not be fully true. I've cited it on a few sources, but it states that the game may take place in the year 1895 in Austria. Whether or not this is true, I'm uncertain, but it does actually make sense, because it does seem like it does take place in the real world, and right around the Easter holiday. Now, the plot in the story is about a little girl, a child of light, as the story progresses to tell you, who one night goes to sleep and wakes up in the world of Lumaria. Or Lumaria, I'm not really sure how that goes. But regardless, she believes she is dreaming, as where the rest of the world believes she is dead and cold to the touch. Her mission is to recover the stars, the moon, and the sun from the darkness, battling it and solving puzzles all at once. Along the way, she will have help from different races, species, and cultures of those species. And they will all team up in different ways for different reasons, later progressed in the story, to decide how the fate of the world of Lumaria will be taken care of, as it is also then later linked in with the real world. So, on to the next one. Now, as always, when we enter the presentation and music, I have to rely on usually my handy-dandy notebook digital version, but unfortunately it is an acting hub, so I had to revert back to the handy-dandy notebook, as we like to call it, from Blue's Clues, apparently. So, anyway, the presentation. It is presented itself as almost a traditional JRPG. JRPG, for those of you that don't know, is a Japanese role-playing game. It's what we actually started calling the RPGs that were turn-based when we started doing action and adventure, at least here in the States. So, Final Fantasy 1 through 6, 7, 8, 9, I think all the way up till about 10. I mean, it was sort of traditional. But, so, it's, of course, got one exception to the rule. This exception is a firefly that is both immortal and apparently unfazed by the elements, planes, whatnot. Now, what makes him unique is that, of course, he joins you sort of as a party member, but kind of reminds me of the fairy from The Legend of Zelda. But at the same time, he has the ability to, if you shine the light, which I think is the LT trigger, it's one of the triggers at least, on the party member, it'll heal them by so much. As your levels increase, it increases. I think, if I remember from the Let's Play, we ended around the 90s, and he was able to heal like 27 HP per second or two. Or, you can go over to the enemy, shine the light on them, blinding them, and slowing them down to allow your attacks to actually hit before they can. And that's actually where my next point comes into the strategy. It is very heavily based on strategy. And what I mean by this, as I put this down for a second, what I mean by this is there's an active bar, ATB is Final Fantasy and some others had called it, that as it goes up, you get to a point where you're in an attacking phase. Well, while you're in an attacking phase, if you or the enemy beats you and attacks you while you're in that phase, you get pushed back and have to do the attack all over again. Sort of an interruption, I believe is actually what they call it. Now, there is ways around this, like an unstoppable potion, which negates the effects of this, but that's where the Firefly comes in. And that's also where the strategy of this game comes in, is through that ability to stop you and the opponent when you're about ready to attack. Now, also within this strategy, it is very heavily based on certain things. Some enemies will only be physically damaged, others will have to involve magic, fire, ice, lightning, and the light. Now, each one will hurt them more than the other sometimes, whatever their weakness is. But if you try to attack a magic-based user, it usually doesn't take off that much. And if you attack a magic-based user, it also then does not take off that much. With a few exceptions to the rule, usually. Alright. So, the skill tree and gem creation add strategy and builds. This is very true. You have a skill tree, which as you gain levels, you're able to gain skills based on 1 point or 2. So either 1 level or every 2 levels, you can gain a skill. These skills range everywhere from being able to attack all enemies at once with your attacks, to attacking all enemies with a certain type of magic, not to mention strength increases, HP increases, basically just building you up to make you stronger and better than what you were before, which does so progression. And that is one of the things I definitely do enjoy in a game, showing how far you've progressed as a character. Now, the gem creation screen is very interesting. In the Let's Play, I really did not use it at all, except the final part of the game, the final 2 bosses. And that was because I wanted to make sure that there was no way we were going to have another episode when that time hit. But they range from red crystals, blue, green, purple, yellow, light blue, white, black, and rainbow. At least that's what I'm going to call the rainbow one. It's like spindle or something. And each one would have a different effect. Either if you attach it to an armor, a weapon, or an accessory to wear around the neck. Depending on what you could do, I think my final build that I ended up going with was everybody started 30% further on in the timeline constantly. The physical users increased their attacks, the magical increased their magic, and I just boosted everybody's defense, which greatly did help. So it does bring a lot of strategy into the game. So it's an RPG that's based around strategy. Let's see. Now, as you're traveling through the land of Lemuria, there's a map that will unlock itself so that you can fast travel to different areas of the game again to re-explore them, mostly for collectibles and to gain levels if you die. So this adds a nice collectible grinding element if needed. Oh yes, my favorite. It felt like every word and sentence rhymed all the way to the end. Sentences, driving me into a rhyming fit. Yes. As of course, I used the talking element of the game because there was no voiceovers except maybe for the narrator. There was the fact that everybody rhymed. And a few times I got into the rhyming fit and then started yelling at myself after the game when I started going back into the real world, and people are like, "You're rhyming a little bit." Yeah, but that. I'm not saying it's bad. It's a nice way to go at it. I mean, make it feel like a story or a poem, something around there, but the rhyming, oh, dear me. Problematic sometimes. Alright, so let's go into the music. The music is going to be a little bit shorter of an area, but at least there's something to do with it. Now, the music was very peaceful, somber, and mostly relaxing. Most of the tracks that they had in this game, which states that there was about 18 or so done by a famous Canadian singer and songwriter, which I will not try to butcher the name because I felt that I would. But they did 18 tracks. There was like 2 or 3 vocal, which I thought was very nice. I even mentioned it at the end of the game on the Let's Play. But it was nice. It was like calming and relaxing. And sometimes it was needed, especially for the battle system. Yeah, like I stated, the music was very enjoyable. It was enjoyable to the point where it could be used as a lullaby. Whenever I was playing it to grind for levels for the next episode when we would lose in it, my son sometimes would start dozing off in the middle of the music, so I thought that was cute and did show that it was sort of like a lullaby. So, bring on the next part of the review. And did I seriously just leave my hand up in that position as I segue to the next one? Wow, I could have been like that for hours. But anyway, welcome to the character part of the show, where I will be talking a little bit about the main characters, maybe a few of the villains, we'll see. First one on the list is, of course, Aurora. She is the child of light, the main character, and a little girl who wields light magic. That was pretty much it. Honestly, I could probably just read these because I really don't have much for the characters. Pretty much what I'm describing is what they are. They talk a little bit throughout it. They have a few emotions, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm probably gonna butcher this one. Igniglius. He's a firefly, the helper, and new to this world. Now I can talk a little bit about him without spoiling too much. He was summoned or created by a ghost or some mysterious cloaked figure. And he was created to help Aurora on her journey, which thank goodness that they did send somebody to help her, because there are puzzles that involve the Firefly's light. Without those, we probably would be left stuck in a palace, rotting away with maybe one or two friends. Probably not even one. I don't think we ran into anybody during the first set of light puzzles. Alright, then there's Finn, a dwarf-like... A dwarf-like, really. That's what we're going with. A dwarf. Well, he's a dwarf-like race, and they call themselves the Kapala. He's magic-based user. He wields both fire, ice, and lightning. He also likes mints, and he's only 13, but looks like he might be 109. So, leading to the old theory that dwarfs do grow beards at early ages. We have both Rubella and Tristis, a brother-sister pair of jesters. They use debuff and healing magic respectively, done a little differently, and they also symbolize the theater trope of the happy and sad mask. That's where Rubella's happy, playful, and can get no sentences corrected by her other cast. They'll correct her at every turn. We have Tristis, who is sad and down and depressing all the time. And I even give him the voice of something like this, because why not? The world shall feel my pain. As well, Rubella was kind of high and happy and joyful. So they really did take truth to this. I mean, you could tell that they were using the theater trope of it for the gestures. And honestly, they were even in the theater. So, I mean, come on. Kind of thick and thin there together. We have Nora, stepsister to Aurora. That's really all I can say. Robert, a mouse-like race called Bulbous. Really? So we have a dwarf, two clowns, and a mouse. Oh, and wait. It gets better. Not only is it a mouse, but he is money-orientated for both business, for the whole species. He specializes in archery and archery skill, which he might be the only mouse in that whole Bulbous group that actually does something outside of bad-mouthing Aurora and every other race. So, we've got all these, so what is next? Organis, or Orgianagus. I can't pronounce his name. My wife assumed it was a she, but the story at least does call him a he many times. He does have a brother, and he is a member of the Katagidia clan. Now, how can I best describe him? Well, according to what notes I wrote, he is of a species who has the build of Sully from the Monsters, Inc. series, except not blue and pinkish, and as some memes have showed, oh, poor Sully, as he's now carpet or cloth. But he wears this mask and armor, and, well, he does joke once. At least I think he's joking. I took it as a joke. He is mostly physical with tank-like abilities. Now, what do I mean by this? Of course, his physical attacks are amazing, but most of his stats are high HP, strong defense, able to make people taunt at him to only attack him. So he is basically, yeah, the RPG equivalent of a tank. And then there's Gen. Oh, and here we go, rounding out the party. Gen, well, I really didn't actually learn what she was called, her race, but I saw her as a reptilian-type species. Now, Gen, something that is not her actual name, but that's what the party starts calling her because the name is Genofala or something. They call him Gen, so I'm calling her Gen. Her skill or magic, I'm not sure what you want to call it, is based around time. Time on the battlefield. So basically, she can speed up the characters or slow down the enemy. I've got to say, with all the characters, this is the main party, of course, they're pretty well balanced. Now, who are the main villain? Well, really Queen Umbra, the Queen of Darkness, the one who's stolen the sun, the moon, and the stars. And even though the stars somehow go straight to Aurora pretty fast, but her other two stepsisters, I guess stepsisters, because it's kind of revealed that Umbra is the stepmom. So, slight spoiler, maybe. I don't really think it is, because it gets said pretty early on that the stepsisters are guarding the sun and the moon. So, let's move on to the reception of the game and what others thought about it and other game companies. As a norm now on the reception, I will take from 3 different companies or game reviewer sites that I won't mention, of course, and I will either agree with them, say no, and kind of defend my reasons here and there. So the first company, they praised the combat and the visuals. The visuals was a nice artistic style, I do agree with that. The combat, I can praise it. I mean, strategy-wise, it is nice. It's just it really felt broken at the same time, in my opinion, over the defending mechanism. It worked, but it didn't. But I guess if I would have used more items, it probably would have went better, as you might have seen with the last 2 battles if you watched the Let's Play. All across the board, it got very positive reviews. I mean, it ranged between the 8s and the 9s. So, we'll get into that, though, with the rating. That same site said, though, they felt like the rhyming felt forced. Well, yeah, when you try to rhyme a whole game together as one, of course it's going to feel forced. But I do agree with them. It felt like the rhyming wasn't constantly needed. Like every once in a while, or a few scenes, that would have been fine. But every single word, it could drive a man to rhyming nuts. Another one stated that the combat was simple but fun. It could range from simple. I think it could be a little difficult, especially in the higher functions, but they probably only played the game on the casual setting or the normal setting to get the feel of how people would feel about it. But it was fun. I will agree with that. It was praised for its story by that second same company. And yeah, I mean, the story did seem kind of non-original. The light versus the dark. I mean, it was done a little differently, so yeah, the story was alright. I mean, at least it kept me enticed. The final source said it wasn't a typical game done by Ubisoft that they normally see. I haven't played too many Ubisoft games in a while. The Rayman series, the Assassin's Creed series. So yeah, I guess it was a little bit out of the norm for them going to a traditional RPG type setting after it's kind of died down over here in the States. But you know what? I love RPGs like this, so I felt it a welcoming, along with Bravely Default, and there was another game that did an RPG style, the South Park Stick of Truth, and I'm not even a big fan of South Park, really. But I really did enjoy their RPG, especially going to Dungeons & Dragons. They also say that the visuals were gorgeous, and the story was thought-provoking, that draws you in. I suppose thought-provoking. It drew me in at least. I don't know about thought-provoking. That might be going a little too far in my personal opinion. Like I said, the story was kind of on the basis of it could be a Star Wars movie if done differently. Just a little differently. I mean, it seemed like it's been done a few times, but just differently. So thought-provoking, maybe. Maybe. But this one did state that it was simple yet diverse with their battles. And yeah, I mean, they were diverse. Like I said, magic, physical attacks, time elements, freezing, healing. Yeah, it was quite diverse. So I will praise that one. I did really enjoy that there was a lot of mechanics in this game for its battle system, but yet it was still simple in a sense of you knew point A to point B what you had to do for the most part. And if you didn't, you learned. You died, you got to keep your levels, I think, and then you would just try again. So, this is normally where I go into my final thoughts, but really there isn't much for final thoughts. I don't even think I've really got one other than to maybe say that there shouldn't be a sequel. There's no need for it. That's really it. So we're just going to skip over final thoughts on this episode and go straight to the rating system and what few people thought about it and what my final one is going to be. Rating. Yep, looks like I didn't have any final thoughts. Sorry about that. Like I said, there really wasn't anything to final thought about like there was D4 and even a little bit of Murdered. So, on to the rating. So, of course, I got 3 game sites, game reviewers that I took from. Not going to tell you who they are. Go look them up for yourself so that you have multiple sources. Or at least, go ahead and review, do other reviews. Don't just for me. Alright, so one of them rated it an 8.5, another rated it a 9.5, and the last one rated it a 9.3. Might be a little high, in my opinion. Like I said, I did have a few issues with the game. Really, it was the combat more than anything. Simple, diverse, yes. And again, it could just be because I played on the hardest difficulty, but I've got to be there for the people who do the harder difficulties. I just can't rate it for the simplistic. For the simplistic, I would probably agree with this and give it about a 9.0 solid, but unfortunately, I can't. The hard difficulty really does add an element of showing that the battle mechanics might be just a little bit broken with the speed and time. I mean, I swear every time that I was attacking, they would still beat me. Especially right at the end of the game when I did lose. It was like, no matter how fast or what level I was at, they were still able to beat me every time. So, because of the hard element, I'm going to give it a hard, solid rating of a 7. Now, this doesn't mean that it's not a bad game. I do mostly agree with what they said. So, like I said, 9 for simplistic and just enjoying the story, the elements, whatnot, but a 7 all around for the gameplay. So, that takes care of this season of Rose Play. We've played the Child of Light series from start to finish. Feel free, if you watch this review and this was the first thing that you started with, feel free to go over and watch any of the videos. You don't have to watch all of them. If you don't want to get it spoiled for you. If you don't want to play the game and want to watch it all, feel free to. Otherwise, just watch parts and bits and see if it's a game for you. As for me, I will give it a, since it was cheap, a buy. It is digital as far as I know only, but I mean, I think it was like $9 to $14. Kind of worth it, honestly. But where does this leave Roseplay for Season 4? Well, in case you didn't make it through all of the last episode of the Let's Play, that was an hour and 20 minutes, which I do apologize. I tried to stick to 30, but it was no saving type points and final bosses, so I just kind of went with it. But we will be starting the Tomb Raider Definitive Edition playthrough on the hardest difficulty. And when will this start? Of course, next week, like every other episode. However, it'll be a special episode because it will be done on December 25th, which to some of you, as you know, is Christmas for quite a few people. So I'll have a little something special again for everybody. But until then, I'm your host, Orion Moonrose, and this was the season finale of Roseplay, Season 3, Episode 29. Until next time, remember, keep gaming, never give up. Please, please, be faster than the enemy.